There we go. It's recording.
All right. Hello and welcome back to all our listeners back at the Culture Cafe after a little bit of a break. Super happy to be back. Curtis, how you doing?
Good. Thanks, Owen. What about you?
I'm good, man. I'm especially good actually because we've got a couple of new followers tonight. Put up a bit of info on the podcast. Gave it out to my class today over here in the Netherlands, and had great feedback. Really excited for all you new listeners from IPM second year to suss out this awesome talk that you all gave some good interest to. So big ups for getting involved in that. Hopefully we can do this topic justice.
Getting into some international promotion over there. I like it.
A shameless promoter.
That's all right. Got
I'm
to
actually
get it
looking to
done
tee up a
somehow.
job with a couple of Melbourne clubs when I get home for promoting on
Oh, of
Facebook.
course. Yeah,
Bit of an Isaac
definitely.
Nolan. Isaac
Oh,
Nolan back
okay.
in the
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonder how anyway's doing nowadays.
Sneaky little diss. Sorry, Isaac. Um, so our topic for tonight, well, today, time zones
Today,
ting.
tonight. Owen's
Um,
10. You're 10 hours behind me, Owen.
I am, yeah, unfortunately, you're ahead.
Living in the
Uh,
future, but
crazy shit. So we're really excited to do this one, and we've been looking into it for a while now. And Curtis, you actually brought the idea forward, so hit us.
I did. So I was browsing Netflix a few weeks ago and stumbled on a podcast called Unnatural Selection, and I was instantly hooked by the really sort of cinematic and interesting trailer. And I watched like the whole all four episodes in a day. I was hooked, and it introduced me to the contentious topic of genetic engineering. So yeah, it's become a really important area in the forefront of biological science recently, and it seems like it's gotten very little airtime. Like I'd hardly heard of it until recently, but after
Yeah.
watching that doco and reading some articles, I was like, seems really important. And I told you about it, and you shared my interest, and I think we had to do a podcast on it.
I mean, sometimes every now and then we get together and we do a podcast on something we both find interesting. So it's no surprise we've ended up doing another topic we find interesting, mate.
Yeah, what a surprise.
Yeah,
Didn't know.
crazy talk. But
Yeah.
yeah, you came to me with this idea for genetic engineering, and I went away and I haven't finished it yet, but I watched some of Unnatural Selection, and it's a fantastic documentary that, to be fair, it's very, as you said, very cinematic, but the ideas brought forward in it are like, they're revolutionary. There's a lot to be uncovered here, and it's very exciting that we get to have a chat about this.
Mm.
Just from genetic engineering, we're going to talk about CRISPR, the CRISPR tool. We actually had a really great interaction with all you guys, all you listeners on Instagram, with some of the ethics behind genetically modified organisms and genetically modified
Mm.
crops. So we're going to talk about that, and that's really exciting, and we really appreciate you guys getting involved in that. We want to look towards bringing some more of that in.
Yeah,
So
for
yeah,
sure. And I think that's something. It's such an ethically charged issue. That's really like
oh, for sure.
the majority of the debate. People aren't debating anything except whether it's a morally just thing to do. Yeah. Oh, and there's obviously some other things we'll get into: financial issues, intellectual
Yeah.
property, big pharmacy. But its possibility in curing many diseases that have troubled humanity for long periods of time. There's a lot to it, but it's all very morally charged. So
Yeah. And I feel like the
debates.
way the world's heading, especially the youth of today, a lot of topics are morally charged. I mean, take a look at veganism, for example. There's so much morals to that, and there's so much morals to the asylum seeking debate and the
Climate
gender
change.
equality debate, climate change. It's everything is really focused around morals these days. And as young adults, we're really challenged with our morals. Whether you stand on one side or the other side in a topic, it can be hard to project your morals out and have them heard, and really find a group of people that align themselves with you. So I think it's fantastic that we have the chance to share this and share our morals behind it and our listeners' morals. And talk about a topic that is so morally charged in a world that really revolves around our morals. So I'm going to stop saying morals.
Um, and thanks to everyone who engaged with the Instagram polls that Owen put up, because it's definitely good to get a bit of a cross section of what our viewer base thinks on all the things that we talk about.
Yeah, and it
And
is
we'll be using
exciting.
those statistics, won't we? We'll be
Yeah,
using
for
some of
sure.
those while we'll discuss them later.
100%.
Okay.
So, do you want to kick us off and basically tell us what the CRISPR-Cas9 tool is?
Okay, so apparently CRISPR was discovered a long time ago, in 1987,
Yeah.
by some researchers at Osaka University. But at the time, they hadn't realized what they'd done. But the first the first people to take what was found out back in 1987 and propose that it was used to edit genomes very accurately was Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier. I remember Jennifer Doudna appears in the documentary. She
She
gets interviewed
does.
multiple times in Unnatural Selection. But CRISPR-Cas9 is it stands for, yeah, I know we said we wouldn't get into the science, but this is just something I remembered off the top of my
Drop
head.
them.
So
Hit it with them.
yeah. Clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, and Cas9 is the protein. Cas9 is a
Yeah.
specific protein. So basically, it's a protein, to my understanding, in layman's terms, it's a protein with some genetic information that they attach to it, and then they also give it instructions for where to cut the genome that it's going to, and it takes the genetic information inside it, goes to the area on the genome of an organism that it wants to remove, and then replaces that removed section with the information that the scientists attached to it at the beginning. So it's a
Yeah.
way to basically sort of copy paste some information in the space of where some already was,
Right. So
to overwrite an area of the genetic code.
overriding the genetic code.
Yeah, that's how it sounds to me.
Big. Yeah, I think you've put that perfectly. Just if anyone listening is struggling to visualize that, you're all familiar with the twisty ladder that is the gene code in the body. Imagine that what the CRISPR-Cas9 tool does is it takes a snippet of that twisty gene ladder, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it inserts another section of the scientist's choice, and replaces that area in the gene ladder. So you're taking a bit out, you're putting a new piece in, and that could be a different sequence of letters. And that's what creates the genetic change. That's where you're copying and pasting the new genetics. Is that
That sound
does
no,
that
that's
sound
exactly right from from my
okay?
understanding.
Yeah, that's it's pretty crazy stuff. Genetic
Yeah.
manipulation. Yeah, no
Mm.
wonder it's causing
And
such a buzz at the moment.
something that's at the forefront of the CRISPR technology as well as gene drives. Did you get up to that in Unnatural Selection?
Gene drives? No,
I
I
think
don't
it's
think
near the
so.
end. So gene drives are like, because gene drives, it's so, as opposed to when you use CRISPR in an organism, and it's only going to affect like a certain amount, it's only going to affect a certain amount of cells, like
Yeah.
when you apply it like locally. But they're researching these things called gene drives, which is like you you put I think it's you put in, I'm not 100% sure about this, but you put in um the CRISPR information and the CRISPR-Cas9 information, but then also like an instruction for it to, I think it's like replicate or do something to
Uh,
it guarantees inheritance. So it's
yeah.
not like a chance inheritance in a population. It's like it guarantees that all of the offspring of that organism will have that genetic trait. And they're using it in they will in Unnatural Selection, at least they were using it they were considering using it in New Zealand to control the rat infestation. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's another even that's another super controversial topic because it's very risky. Some people believe.
Yeah, well, you're playing with the ecosystem then. That's when
Mm.
that's almost the point when humans do become the all and absolute God on earth, when we can pick and choose which animals we want to survive and continue living. I know
Mm.
we've somewhat had that ability when it comes to agriculture, picking the fattest cows and the fattest pigs to reproduce and have better meat. But when you're talking about wiping out an entire species just through genetically engineering
Mm.
the
And
the way that they live, that's crazy.
that's another interesting thing you bring up. Like, how different is scientifically editing an organism's genome versus selectively reproducing animals for thousands of years? Like, that's a very early form of genetic modification, I'd argue. Chickens used to
100%.
be like chickens, like from back in the day, used to be like this big, and now they're like huge.
Yeah.
A lot of can't live like their full term of lives, like in fact, like in industrial farming because their bodies are too big for their legs and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, I'd argue that's genetic modification to an extent.
I completely agree. And another thing that reminds me of that would just be like we already have designer dogs. We have these dogs with
Mm.
so I mean, I think one of the guys in Unnatural Selection is a dog breeder, and he says that dogs are the most diseased and ailed species on planet Earth purely through human intervention. We've tried to
Mm.
crossbreed them to get God, I personally don't think any of the crossbred dogs are attractive whatsoever or have any appeal. I
In
know some people
purebred.
do. Yeah, sorry, purebred.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have like the dogs with the scrunch. I don't even know the names for them. Like bulldog, French bulldogs and whatnot with scrunched up faces and breathing issues. And I would agree with what you've said and say that that's also a form of genetic engineering. It just doesn't have the scientific. It's a much longer process. It's not a
Mm.
cut and clean copy paste technological process.
Not at all. And yeah, exactly. And it's sort of like it's tradition versus like more modern versions of a similar idea, I think. It's like we're looking
Yeah,
for traits that we want, but we did it in a way that was a lot more sort of seemingly like natural. But
yeah,
now we're sort of trying to jump thousands of years of genetic modification with
yeah.
technology.
And
Mm.
I think so. I think that maybe something to think about would be that yes, we've been doing it for thousands of years, and I personally don't think it's ethically right what we've been doing to dogs and other animals for our own benefit. Um, but I do think that there are a lot more dangers associated with the genetic editing CRISPR tool. For example,
Mm.
um, what if these genes end up in the wrong animals at some stage? What if we give mosquitoes or a certain breed of mosquitoes a gene that forces them to die out and therefore give no one malaria, which is amazing. That's fantastic. But what if that gene somehow spreads? And I'm not a genetic expert. What if it spreads to fruit flies or to wasps or to bees? And then
Mm.
all of a sudden we have this gene that is completely out of control and spreading around the world and wiping out species and having far-reaching consequences that we had no intention
Mm.
to create.
Yeah. Yeah, which is interesting, and it's an understandable concern. It's funny because like the former like NASA biophysicist Josiah Zayner
Yeah,
who's a major character in or a major subject of unnatural selection seems to think that there's absolutely no risk of anything like that. He's so
yeah,
confident that it's fine. In fact, he like injects himself with a muscle growth
he
gene
did do
in
that.
front of
Yeah,
an audience on film.
yeah, that was a good moment in the TV show.
Yeah, it's such a
That was,
unique such a unique moment on film.
yeah,
Mm.
um, yeah. So, well, I guess if you have, scientists like that, it is reassuring to see scientists have that much belief in the process. Because I personally want genetic engineering to be something that we can use to our advantage without disadvantaging the rest of the species on Earth. I think it's so exciting. But scientists have been wrong in the past.
Oh yeah.
They have 100% been wrong. And this is a scientific technology. I think one of the scientists in the TV show says we've scratched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to genetic engineering and editing. There is so much more we have to learn. And why rush it? Why not study this more and really put it through its paces as something that we try and develop and understand slowly, rather than racing into it and trying to use it as soon as we get it?
Yeah. So for sure, and it's an interesting debate, like whether what the role government has in this, like whether it
Yeah,
should be, whether technology and state should be, completely separated to absolutely allow the greatest amount of innovation, or whether the government should be able to impose controls on this to make sure that no one gets out of hand and does something that endangers people's lives and
yeah, for
animals' lives.
sure. Yeah, and it's like, so we've got a piece in our Google Doc that talks about the pros and cons of regulating and putting in place policies that control genetic editing technologies. So
Oh,
yeah, it's like we either regulate it now and we have greater control over the developments. We have time to stop and analyze the technology and what it could do. But then the cons are that we have less chance for immediate innovation and immediate impact on saving communities. Like, for example, the rat problem in New Zealand, or the malaria problem in Africa, you know. And the other con is if we move ahead right now and try and regulate it all with a coalition of the willing, you could say, of those countries who are willing to take care of this and invest in this issue, will we be leaving behind developing nations who don't have the knowledge or the innovation to create any genetic engineering tools, thus creating a massive gap between the rich and the poor, and a gap between who can access genetic engineering technology and who it suits, who these policies suit?
exactly. Like, there's only a very select amount of countries on Earth that are going to be capable of really investing and like promoting this as a widespread thing, even especially for human use. Like, it's very unlikely that a lot of countries are going to be able to get to that stage anytime soon. And it begs the question, like, I think I've heard a few people have brought up the idea to me that, it could lead to a sort of oh, and it was even in the documentary as well, but it could lead to another sort of form of discrimination against people who aren't genetically modified, potentially, because it seems it's something that's very fundamental, and it's sort of harks back to, like Aryan, Nazism and stuff, and like
Yeah,
whether people who aren't genetically modified are like inferior to those who are.
that's a scary
Obviously,
one.
it's all sort of just like a that's a not a it's not a legitimate argument, but it's just like, in human society's done stuff like that before, and it could happen again.
And I think we forget sometimes how recently humans did that, how
Mm,
recent the genocides have been, in the Holocaust, for example,
mm.
um, the
And there's genocides happening
Aryan
right now.
society. That's
Yeah.
exactly
On the
right.
off topic,
Yeah.
did you hear about the document leak from Beijing from the persecution of the Uyghur Muslims?
No.
Yeah, so there's up to about, and like initially it's being denied, bit of a tangent
Go,
timer,
go.
but
I'm not even going to put it on. Talk about this for as long as you
so
need to. This is interesting.
yeah, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, like China's been denying for years now, like their persecution of the Uyghur Muslim ethnic minority who live in Xinjiang province, which is like northwestern China, and
Yeah.
they've just been denying it despite satellite photos of expanding huge facilities out in the middle of nowhere. No one knows what they're for, and like the destruction of mosques on satellites, they can see that they're being knocked down, and and also anecdotal reports of defectors or expatriates saying my family have been imprisoned, they're Uyghur Muslims for no reason and stuff like that. And Beijing had just been denying it, but there's been a 400-page document leak that came out yesterday. So some officials leaked it out like
Yeah.
what an amazing person whoever that was. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically
Well,
confirms everyone already knew, which is that the Chinese government's imprisoned up to 3 million Muslims for voluntary re-education camps. So yeah, it's just, yeah,
what the
essentially a bit of
fuck?
could
3
be an early,
million.
yeah, 3 million.
That's
It's an
fucked.
absolute,
That's
yeah,
fucked up. Hmm.
yeah.
And the fact that I didn't know that this was going on, so I assume that there'd be a fair few people out there who also aren't aware of this issue, which is the
Mm,
scariest part. The fact that they can do that, and
mm.
only once some documents are leaked does the rest of the world begin to find out. I mean,
Yeah, well,
surely our leaders and other world leaders had some sort of idea that this was occurring.
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And
So,
yeah.
wow. And that almost
And
brings
then
us back to the trusting governments in this with all these issues and policy making.
and the possibility of discrimination on, sort of ethnicity, which at the end of the day is sort of genetics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. God. So that's really scary. Yeah. What
Mm.
would happen?
Something
I
to
mean,
read about afterwards.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's scary stuff. And like, um, I guess it's all well and good. We sit here and we talk about our thoughts on genetic engineering, and we're both, not to pump our own tires up, but I feel like we're both reasonably decent human beings, like the rest of our listeners and the rest of the people out
Yeah.
there. But there's also people out there who are not decent human beings, and their set of values does not lie in equality between all races, genders,
Mm.
ethnicities. It lies in their ethnicity is the best ethnicity, and all the other ones should not be
Mm.
existing with them. There's a lot of
And
people out
and
there who
these
think
people are
that.
in government around the world, so can we trust government to have the final say on anything, really? Who knows?
Going deep. We're going deep.
Yeah.
If you haven't put your seatbelt on yet, now's the time.
Buckle up. Strap in. So,
um,
so we jumped down a bit to because we got into the ethic. What did we jump to ethical issues there? Yeah, regulate now. Yeah,
yeah,
so the
yeah,
idea whether governments regulating now would be a good idea for the future development of gene technology. If we want
yeah,
to take it back into financial issues, perhaps the financial issues
yeah.
concerning this technology.
Let's
So
talk about
yeah,
money.
um, the documentary I think it's almost entirely focused in America, apart from the
Yeah,
Africa segment on Africa and New Zealand segments, which are quite a small part of it. But the majority of the story is following a few people who are intended recipients of gene therapy, and it really highlights the crippling financial burden that is generally healthcare in general in America.
yeah,
um,
100%.
it's crazy. It's absolutely insane how expensive it is
Such an
to
issue,
have healthcare. Yeah, over there.
especially for a country that is so sick. There's so much heart disease and brain issues, all sorts of mental mental illnesses. I feel like America is a massive hotspot. Yes, it has a huge population, but I see America as a very unwell nation in general.
Mm.
I don't think we have any
Um,
American listeners. Actually, we definitely do. I'm sure all our American listeners are fit and healthy and strong and fantastic people, but I do look at
great
America and I just,
patriots and
yeah,
patriots.
great patriots. Land of the free and sick.
Yeah, yeah. And I think America, the idea is like one of the major perks of having a job is that they pay for your health insurance. Because
Yeah,
as we saw in an Unnatural Selection, they could only afford a young man receives gene therapy for his, well, two people. Like there's a young man who receives gene therapy for muscular dystrophy, I think,
yeah,
and
yeah.
another
Spinal.
spinal, and another kid, and there's a child who gets therapy for a genetic or an autism that also includes blindness.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it actually works for him, which is insane. Which is so cool. Restores his sight.
Yeah, and it's beautiful because this little boy wants to be a NASA scientist,
Wants to be an
which you can't
astronaut.
an
Who
astronaut,
doesn't?
and you can't be an astronaut if you can't see. So then, the whole idea behind this genetic therapy curing his eyesight it's really, really beautiful.
Mm, yeah, for
Um,
sure. But unfortunately, in the case of like the spinal dystrophy guy, it didn't actually help him, and he had an adverse reaction to it, an
a
allergic
very
reaction or something.
rare adverse reaction. Very few people have that reaction to it, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I guess so. He had, as you were saying, he had spinal muscular atrophy, and the so the treatment that was available is called Spinraza, which is where they edit the genome in order to take out the part that is causing the muscular atrophy, and then we have the regeneration of the muscles in that area. In this case, it was targeted towards the spine, and unfortunately didn't work. But there are some small clips in the documentary that show young children born with spinal muscular atrophy receiving this Spinraza treatment and slowly being able to walk and build up their strength. I don't know to what stage that strength develops, but it develops in a way that keeps them from being bound to a chair or a bed.
Mm. And and Spinraza cost $750,000 or thereabouts for the first treatment, and then the yearly treatments afterwards cost about $350,000. Which
Yeah.
begs the question: how much power can we give insurance companies to decide who they approve for this drug and who they don't approve, and how much power can we give to large pharmaceutical companies who are able to gouge people? Because ultimately, it's the ultimate example of a market failure, because it's an absolute seller's market. People will do
Yeah.
anything for this. People will do anything to try and
100%.
improve their health, and they have so much power compared to the individual who's trying to access the treatment.
It's shocking because for more than half of the population, $750,000 for what in the first year, followed by $350,000 for the rest of your life, is not an accessible price tag. No way is that an accessible price tag. If you're already struggling to pay bills, you're probably paying for a carer to help you take care of this child that has spinal muscular atrophy. Either that or you've given up your job so you can be at home full time caring for this child. So you're already in a situation where your income is not at maximal flow, and you're being asked to fork out that much money. That's disgusting.
That's cooked, and I don't understand how we seem to have it so good here. So many other late stage capitalist nations have it really good as well, whereas America can't seem to. I'll rephrase that. We're not late stage capitalists, but we've got a highly advanced economy and everyone's living pretty good lives. And America seems to just can't come up with the money with some of the largest revenues in the world to be able to help people get this treatment. Universal healthcare. I think they're the only OECD country that doesn't have universal healthcare.
That's insane. That's a whole. I feel like America in itself is a whole podcast episode.
Oh, I'm
I just
going there in December. It's going to be
You are.
interesting.
All
Yeah,
right.
going there with
Stay
Emma.
tuned. Stay tuned for our
Oh,
cross borders American European podcast episode.
yeah.
Um, I feel like we do hang a lot of shit on America in this podcast in some of our
Mm.
episodes, but I'm
It's
sure
hard
once you
not
go there,
to.
you will see some of the beautiful parts of America, though. I
Yeah,
think.
I'm spending 2 weeks in Missouri where it's going to be interesting. And then I'm going to New York where it's going to be
Missouri.
interesting. It's going to be sick. Should be good though.
Well, Adam
Maybe
Cowboy.
I'll, yeah, I think it might help get rid of a lot of my prejudice, maybe.
Yeah, but a tangent.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
definitely. So, like you said, and it's like such a good and interesting question. How much power can we give insurance companies to decide who they approve for the drug and who they don't approve? Who is someone sitting in an office and going, okay, Curtis, he's got spinal muscular atrophy, but I just he doesn't cut it. I don't think we can give him the money for this. But over here, oh, and he's got it. Oh, yeah, let's give it to him. What are the What are the prerequisites to
Mm. It's
to
a
get?
yeah, it's a
Who
multi because
decides
it
those prerequisites?
yeah, and it's the price gouging by big pharma that flows on because it's like they set such a ridiculous price for this treatment, and then the insurance companies are literally designed to try and not to pay as little as possible. So it's a pretty tricky situation that I think it sort of just trickles down from the people who have access to the technology because they can set the price because the government does very little as they are a very laissez-faire economy, a
It's
small government.
extremely unfair. It's extremely unfair. And not to mention the fact that taxpayers are funding scientific discoveries.
Yeah,
You know, you get taxed, your money goes back into the government, who then spend it on innovation and,
grants
and other
so
stuff,
much.
grants,
Mm.
scientific innovation and development, technology. And all of that technology in America, for example, is completely out of reach to the general public. They're paying their taxes if they are, they're paying their taxes and they can't access anything that their taxes are generating essentially down the road.
Mm. And I
Um,
guess these financial issues lead us well into the problem with, market power, very strong and exploitative pharmaceutical companies. And we had some interesting historical comparisons to talk about how the culture of medical research might have changed. Do you want to take
yeah,
us through those?
sure, I'd love to. So we have Jonas Salk, who was the inventor of the polio vaccine and didn't patent it. So he didn't sell it for anything. He believed that everyone deserved it. And interestingly enough, I think this is fantastic. When he was asked who owns the patent on this vaccine, he said, "The people. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" So you have a scientist here who's discovered the polio vaccine, which, by the way, changed the world. To eliminate polio is a huge deal. And he just gave that out. He said, "You know what? Everyone has access to this. This is something that is going to change the world." And it did, which is amazing.
Mm.
And then you have the insulin patent, which was sold for $1 by each of the three inventors. So that's almost like
Again,
they're
life
taking the
changing
piss a
for
bit there.
millions
A
of
bit of,
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a bit of humor in that. They've just gone, "We'll sell it for $1 each," because,
Yeah.
well,
For a
you can see
buck.
where the humor is there. $1,
Yeah.
$1 for a glass of whiskey.
Red Dead 2 players.
Yeah,
You out there somewhere. We
you
we
out
feel
there
you.
listening. Um, yeah, it's crazy. And now we have companies selling drugs for wild amounts of money. Wild.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention one last nice historical innovation that was given away practically for free. Sir
Yeah.
Alexander Fleming, discoverer of penicillin, transferred the patents to the US and UK governments on the eve of World War II. So obviously to his allied states, I'd say, but to help treat the military infections that would inevitably occur in the worst war in human history. And I think he did that for free as well, potentially. I'm not sure if he did it for free, but still very socially minded activity versus the very profit minded activity that we see nowadays in the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical industry.
And that's fantastic. And I'm also thinking now, yes, yes, if you put in the hard work to inventing something like this, I would argue you're still entitled to some form of income because what you've done is amazing. You've probably dedicated your whole life to this. You've spent hours in the lab researching,
Mm,
working. You've had numerous failures. So, yes, you're entitled
yeah.
to some revenue, but at the rate that they're charging it, it's like that sort of wealth isn't necessary. You know, you could sell and patent these vaccines and genetic engineering products for an amount that will keep you very, very comfortable for the rest of your life, whilst still having these technologies and medicines available to the general public for a very, very reasonable price. I feel like it would not be so hard to find a middle ground there rather than charging 750,000 US dollars. for 1 year.
Mm.
Like, I mean,
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess that's why it's so interesting with CRISPR, a technology that you can allegedly sort of because one of the issues that I see with the big pharma is that there is a lack of competition. There's a few very large companies that are able to sort of basically create a cartel with each other and just make the prices really high. Whereas I feel like CRISPR is a technology that's very democratic in nature, in that you can go online and order a CRISPR kit to your house and fucking inject yourself, and it's only going to cost you like $100.
yeah.
Not saying that's necessarily a good idea, but it's a lot less than 750,000 if you want to have a crack yourself.
Far more affordable.
Because
Just
like,
have a
yeah,
crack,
but
mate.
then again, just have a crack. But then again, we have the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. So like our government pays for, that's why our drugs are so, like in other countries, namely, all I can think of is America, because I draw a parallel because they're maybe slightly, I don't know, there is at least as advanced as us, but they have such expensive drugs, like some normal things that you get every day, perhaps contraceptive pills or like Valium and prescription drugs are super expensive, and they also have the highest rate of prescription addiction in the world. I don't know. I'm gonna get off topic, but this is a topic that really interests me and makes me really angry that healthcare is so terrible in a country where it could be so much better.
If you're listening right now and you have anything you'd like to say or input about the American healthcare system, give us a call on 1-800 Culture Cafe. And no, in all seriousness, if you are interested in that topic, because I'm interested, Curtis is mildly interested by the seams of things.
Gets me
Um,
riled up.
we'd love to hear from you and potentially get in touch about uh, having you on the show. Yeah,
um,
so get in touch.
what's
Anyway,
next?
sorry, I
So,
digress. Let's. We've got some pretty spooky, scary stuff about what genetic engineering could do and the potential for curing diseases, curing cancers, aging. I think we should get into that because this is where it gets thick. So we've got curing diseases. So in 2015, this is an example of how genetic engineering could cure HIV, which is plaguing mankind at the moment. And if we find a cure for that, that's again going to be something that's completely life-changing for so many people. And so in 2015, scientists were able to successfully cut cells out of HIV patients. So they completed an experiment with rats who had 99% of their cells infected with the HIV virus and successfully lowered the amount of body cells with HIV DNA in them to 48%. So again, we're using this CRISPR tool to cut out a section of the genome, replace it, and through doing that, they halved the amount of HIV DNA in rats. So that was in 2015. It's 2019 now. What could be possible within one more decade?
Yeah, it was
Close,
only
but
CRISPR
but
was only
one decade.
discovered about yeah, CRISPR was only discovered about 7 years ago, and it's
Mm.
come a long way apparently since then.
It's scary. Like the idea of curing HIV is, I mean, that would change the lives of so many.
Mm, definitely.
Yeah, and all they did
And
to
any
do this,
genetic disease.
yeah, 100%.
There's apparently there's over 3,000 genetic diseases caused by a single letter being wrong in your DNA. I don't know if multiple letters mean there's more as well, but
Yeah,
3,000 diseases is a lot.
yeah, and so genetic diseases we're talking about here could be color blindness, hemophilia, which is the excessive bleeding due to an inability of your blood to clot. So essentially, you're losing a lot of blood. You're always in danger. And Huntington's, which is a really scary one. That's the progressive breakdown of your brain. The nerve cells in your brain slowly cease to
Mm.
work. So a modified version of Cas9 is currently being developed, which aims to allow scientists to change these one single letters and fix the problem. So, for example, that could, imagine you're born with color blindness. This is a very G-rated example, I guess, but you have color blindness, and you know, on your 18th birthday or something, your parents, sort you out with this Cas9 tool, which swaps that letter mistake for another one, and all of a sudden you can see all these different colors, and it would just be, that's at the bottom level. Again, it's that would be fantastic. That would be so amazing. That's so exciting.
So
Like,
I just read
that's
what you
right.
put in the aging section, and it's funny. I laughed.
Yeah.
So I guess
Do you want to talk
I
about
guess
that?
sure thing. So, and this was also an unnatural selection, but the accepted idea is that aging is the process of cells breaking down over time,
Yep.
and if we were to begin to edit the genes that affect aging, we're completely changing the direction of human evolution, playing with natural factors.
Yeah. Which is scary.
But what was shown in unnatural selection was a test on rats, and they put it was an elderly rat, and you could tell he was older. He had a spinal hunch. He had a poor quality coat, low energy, strange behavior, and then they took a rat of the same age that they'd been treating with a CRISPR anti-aging genetic code treatment, and he was the same age, and it was crazy. He looked young. He was running around. He looked like the other rat's son, and they were the same age. It was so uncanny to see that they were the same age,
That I do
and one
remember
of
that
them was
part.
like
That was
normal
weird.
rats.
That was
Mm,
scary. Oh,
yeah.
so so are we gonna have grannies and granddads just running around on the football field? Are we gonna have AFL players, rugby players, basketball players retiring when they're 110? Is that it? Does genetic engineering have the potential to change the course of human evolution like that? And is that necessarily a good thing?
Or as Owen had it, if only some socioeconomic classes have access to this technology to slow aging, will these be the social cultures that live on whilst other social cultures die out? What cultures and traditions will be lost as a result of this? Are we just going to end up with rich middle-aged ladies driving around in jeeps and wearing 2 times U while their immortal husbands go to the races to put money on their genetically modified racehorses? Who
I mean,
knows?
I'm asking the real questions here.
Which touches back on what we were talking about before, in that only those with the means, only the privileged upper middle to upper class people in advanced countries are going to be able to access this technology. So
Yeah.
yeah,
We're gonna have a whole heap of Stacey's driving around, mate.
yeah.
Yeah.
Stacey's mum as well. That'd be all
Stacey's mum isn't going anywhere if genetic engineering picks up.
right. Yeah. Um.
Um, but that's, some other things that we're diving into here is what happens when the human population starts to age a lot slower, essentially, and we're all around for a lot longer. I know one of the Instagram responses we had was talking about overpopulation and the fact that once we create humans that can live to 150 or 200 years old, what drain does that have on the environment? We already know that overpopulation is one of the leading factors to the damage we've done to our climate. And I know you're a big advocate for this, Curtis, but like the fact that humans are the issue. If there was less humans, there wouldn't be as much of an issue. Um,
mm. Or
so
more
will this
humans making environmentally conscious decisions.
also true? Yeah, for sure.
But at the end of the day, overpopulation is a huge concern as well.
Yeah. So what happens when we have heaps of humans just not dying off, continually making poor decisions, continually buying Starbucks takeaway coffee cups, and what happens? What like where do we pull the
Yeah,
plug and say, hang on, we're meant to die in between 80 and 100. Let's
yeah.
just
I don't think it's acceptable to keep prolonging life beyond into your hundreds. I think that's
I
just
mean,
not necessary.
yeah, and I guess the problem's going to lie in the fact that you and I might think that, but there's going to be billionaires out there with far more money and influence than we have who are going to say, no, man, like I
Yeah,
want to keep living and I can pay for that. So therefore I'm going to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's those wealthy people who can also very much shape public perception of an issue because they do basically influence the media a great deal. And I guess it's going to
Yeah,
be the wealthy potentially who could be really they have a stake, I guess, in this. And so does
yeah,
Big Pharma. So they are definitely going to
exactly.
be trying to manipulate the public perception in ways that they want to on this technology.
Yeah. I'm just picturing like scary ads on TV, those late night ads where it's just like, do you want an extra 5 years for your life? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
call this number to chat with a 150-year-old and this
Mm.
whack shit, this weird
Yeah.
dystopian society where people live for so long. And,
Yeah.
and then another thing, if we did end up going in the direction where we genetically engineer human life to last for longer periods of time, we, is that necessarily beneficial for our mental brain, which is already so prone to anxiety and depression and bipolar disorder and all these other issues? What happens when we start living for double the amount of time? What does that do to us on a mental level, on a psychological level? Can we cope
Mm.
with that? You know, it's
Yeah. There's so many like what ifs with this new technology because I mean I don't understand how this genetic thing works, but like I feel like changing a gene uh uh could potentially like I don't know. I'm not really sure if that's how it works because I feel like, Josiah Zayner would definitely say otherwise that nothing's going to go wrong, but
yeah,
like changing a gene for something could have like hundreds of perhaps very minuscule and you don't notice but unknown consequences for other things in your body, and other things could start
yeah,
changing that you're not aware of that weren't
yeah,
intended.
yeah. I think a good example of that would be that it wasn't in the Unnatural Selection. It was in a TED talk about this. And the idea was brought up by the speaker that basically, what if the gene for being creative goes alongside with the gene for being prone to depression? And if we decide to get rid of the gene that causes depression in humans, what if unknowingly we cut out the gene that inspires beautiful art and creativity? And I know it would be amazing to get rid of depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses, but that's just an example of where two genes could cause the same thing. So, in cutting one thing out of human evolution, what else could we be cutting out? Like you said, what are the far-reaching consequences? And they might seem small at first, and we won't notice it. And then someone's going to go, "Oh shit, we're on a bad path here. We've messed up.
Mm.
We can't go back."
Yeah. And I guess now we're getting into the ethical concerns. So perhaps we could go through responses to some of the ethical questions on the Instagram.
Yeah, that'd be good. I
Sure.
before so just going back to the aging thing, a potential
Yeah.
benefit because it's not all bad, no way. Um, Genetic engineering could allow humans to become better equipped for extended space travel. Like our bodies could become far more advanced and able to withstand the harsh conditions of space travel, which would allow us to explore further into the universe in search of planets capable of sustaining life. So if we do fuck up on Earth, and let's be honest, we're heading in that direction if we don't act fast, um, could genetically engineering astronauts allow us to find other options out there through space travel?
Yeah, because my understanding is that most planets, the duration of travel to get to them is like so many years that it's beyond the normal
Yeah,
lifespan.
exactly. Or could we make it even simpler and just engineer humans to be able to survive on Mars?
Mm,
Can is that a possibility? Who knows with
mm,
CRISPR? It's very exciting. I'm not going to lie. The idea of a human who's able to withstand the harsh conditions of Mars or breathe underwater or anything like that is super exciting. I think there's a lot. It's dangerous, but it really does excite me, and I'm very interested in it. And I think that moving forward, in my personal opinion, in a direction where we are looking into those possibilities is a good thing. But I'm torn as well because I think that it's also so dangerous, and we are playing God here. And with that, let's jump into the ethics.
Sure, sure.
That
Um,
segue grind.
I know. Let's jump into the ethics.
Shit.
Okay. So, and I think what a lot of scientific people would have to say that is that there probably is no God, so we can't play him. But
Wow.
that's
Wow.
contentious as well. It
Or
has
if
it
you're a
is a
philosopher,
popular.
you could say that God is dead.
Yeah, I know. Shout out my boy Nietzsche.
Yeah, out there.
So I'm sure Nietzsche would be fucking frothing genetic engineering, I reckon. Who
Oh,
knows?
God. That could be interesting.
Who knows, really?
Can we engineer?
But
Can we genetically clone him and bring him back? Yeah. Okay.
um,
Okay.
so Nietzsche liked to talk about ethics sometimes. We're also about to talk about ethics right now. My segue game's weak. I'm sorry. So,
Fuck.
so
Shit.
I don't know if I can look at the responses to the polls on my computer. Could you potentially do it on your phone
On
just to
my
bring us into the ethics?
my mobile device, I could. I'd
Yeah.
be happy to.
Thank you,
Um.
because I want to see what the percentages are looking like with what our listeners had to say.
Yeah. Cool. So this is super interesting. Pretty excited to get into this. The first one was: would you consider consuming a crop which has been genetically modified with animals' genes to withstand harsh conditions, a vegan/vegetarian choice? Now, 54% of people said no, and 46% of people said yes. So, where do you stand on that, Curtis?
Um, I'm gonna say, well, I think like in like ideal like it's not, yeah, I'd say no. I'd say it isn't because the
Okay.
impetus is coming from an animal's uh, genetic material. So at the end of the day, it's not a vegan choice. Interestingly, though, I'd like to talk about this quickly because I remembered I did a subject called "Food for a Healthy Planet" at uni,
Yeah.
and one of the lecture series was on genetically modified organisms, and they have been trialing using genes from fish so in order to produce fish oil in grain crops. So
Yeah.
people who are like vegetarian or vegan could get, or are they if they're eating this stuff? But could get fish
Mm,
oil, but not have to eat fish. It's so hard because it's like it's not a vegan choice, but it's so much better than eating fish. So
yeah.
I'm saying I wouldn't classify it as vegan, but like a environmentally minded person would probably do it, I'd say.
Yeah. And we had some really
Would
interesting
eat it.
feedback on this one. Um, basically, I know some people would be fine with me saying their name here, but I'm just, for the sake of the episode, I'm not
Yeah.
going to say any names. But we had a really good input from someone who said that I think the response to the vegan veg question would have very different answers depending on whether said vegan lifestyle, was for ethical or environmental reasons,
Yeah.
which is interesting because, you know,
Can you
if we take
detach ethical and environmental reasons?
very true, it just gets deeper and deeper, doesn't it?
Mm.
But I
But I
think the
totally
way,
understand what they're trying to say. Definitely.
yeah, and the
Is
way
this
I look at that is that if we can create a crop through using uh, some sort of animal genome, we can create a crop that is far less environmentally damaging. For example, let's say we create a crop that requires less water and less land space, therefore has less of an impact on the environment, yet produces and yields the exact same amount of produce. That for me would be an environmentally friendly vegan and vegetarian choice, which is one of the reasons that I try to eat with vegetarian and vegan principles in mind. Um, Not that I'm a full vegetarian or vegan, but I won't open that box. Um, to me, that appeals to the morals and choices that I make because
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
it's injured and hurt one animal. And I know it's like, what's the value of one life? But it
Or
does
potentially
create.
didn't have to hurt them even.
True. I guess I don't really know well, they can put the animal to sleep and take an extract of the gene, right?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think I need to
Yeah.
kill it.
So potentially that's in line. But then again, you have everyone's different ethics. So that was a really interesting response to that question, and I think that's an interesting one. It was closely tied. I thought it would be far more leaning towards an absolute no, but there were a lot of
Yeah,
people.
me too.
46% of people said yes.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, that's interesting. I agree in that like I wouldn't classify that product as vegan because it literally has had an animal input, which makes
yeah,
it by definition not vegan. But
yeah, true.
someone who is environmentally minded, vegans and vegetarians, would probably, I mean, I'd eat it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Really interesting. If you're listening and you didn't get the chance to get involved in these polls, just send us a message while you're listening on what you think, and we'd be more than happy to unpack it in the next episode or something. So, moving on to the next question on the poll: if we can, should we engineer the human race to be as productive and as happy as possible? And this one came in. This was a pretty flat out response. We had 73% of people saying no, 27% of people saying
Oh,
yes. So a lot
wow.
of people are not interested in engineering happiness and productivity in humans.
Wow, that is so interesting. I thought that'd be
Yeah,
a big yes.
I thought this one. I
This
was
is
watching
so
this one, and
interesting.
it started out as a hard yes, and it flipped only a few hours ago, which means that the first people who voted, which was everyone in Melbourne, because everyone was awake, essentially threw in the yes, but this is just going off the timeline. And then when I shared it with everyone over here in Europe, it swung towards no. I wonder if that's had an impact or if that would be anything. I mean, I can
Mm.
look on
We're
Instagram
still
now and
suffering. Yeah, we're still suffering from a temporal issue. You know, it probably hasn't been up for long enough to get a good amount. It's like still going, so we haven't got proper results. But
yeah,
that's really interesting.
yeah, for sure. I mean, where do you stand on it?
Um, well, I mean, if you look at I'm trying to take the question literally and not imply anything else, like so I can just respond to it accurately. But to
Yeah,
engineer the human race to be as productive and as happy as possible, I mean, it comes with some sort of conditions. Like I would agree if it was productive, not at the expense of long-term sustainability,
yeah,
and happy if it was, if we're talking about, shout out to shout out to Peter Singer, Practical Ethics, Utilitarianism,
nice.
which you and Isaac and Luke bought me. I started reading that yesterday. But happy as
Happy birthday.
possible seems to us, if we're thinking about, you know, utilitarianism, meaning like maximizing happiness, which means net happiness. So we're taking away the suffering as well. If it maximizes net happiness, yeah, I mean, productive and happy as possible. I can't answer that question.
Oh, okay.
Not
I
yet.
I'm personally a quite a hard yes. Like, um, I think that if we can engineer humans to one be productive, so looking at it from a economical standpoint, we increase labor productivity. That's a good thing. But then productivity in terms of producing our own happiness and like producing creativity and the arts, music, like all these beneficial things towards society is fantastic and really exciting, you know. But now I'm questioning myself because I'm thinking, is it really happiness if it's engineered?
Who knows?
Oh, damn. I
Yeah.
and oh, and if we make someone productive and they're productive in something that's actually horrible for the human race, what if they become a productive murderer or thief and they start racking
Um,
shit at the Coles self serve? I mean,
tax and brah, tax and brah.
damn.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I guess that's interesting. 78% of people are not for this, though maybe give it until the day's out and it'll balance out a bit
Yeah.
more.
Um,
Uh,
yeah. Wow.
yeah. Next question, because
Crazy.
there's a few of them there. Yeah, this is so fun. I love this.
Yeah. Culture Cafe taken off. Okay, this one is a really interesting one. Would you consider genetically modified foods to be safe and healthy? So, actually, you know what? Because you haven't seen these, do you want to
Yeah.
guess which way it weighed?
Um, I'm gonna say 60% no.
Okay, so 68% of people said yes.
Ah, that's
32% of people
interesting.
said no. And
Wow.
we actually had some replies on this one that I can talk about.
Sure.
So, um, just find it here. So
Amidst
we
the
had
thousands of replies.
all these replies. God damn, it's getting hard. Okay, so I've got it. This person starts off by saying, "I don't have a lot of knowledge on the topic." Good start. But my thought process is that if it's being genetically modified with artificial substances, it's not as healthy as it was.
I'm not sure what that because genetic information by definition is not artificial.
That's so I responded and I said, it's modified with another gene rather than being swapped for an artificial substitute. For example, scientists have used genes from fish in the Arctic to modify spinach to be frost resistant, which I would say isn't artificial because it's coming from a fish. It's fresh produce, mate. Um, uh, this person also, this person then said, interesting about the spinach, but still not something they're keen on, and they don't see a genuine need for it. So
That's interesting. I
it is
mean,
interesting.
again, touching on that uni subject I did, we may not see the need so much for GMO, although their developing nations have benefited greatly from
100%.
genetically modified crops. One of them being the golden rice, which I think
Yeah.
basically cured vitamin A deficiency in Africa.
And the papayas, the
The
fruit that we all know
papayas.
and love, were
Yeah.
about to go extinct in 2013 until genetic modified crops stepped in and went, hold on, brother. We're keeping you in the
You're
race.
not done yet. We ain't
You
done
ain't done
yet.
yet.
Yeah, but
No
that's interesting.
quitting.
I mean, I'm sure there's some negative examples as well
Yeah.
of genetic modification. Do you know of any off by heart, GMO?
So with GMOs, I actually, at the start of the year, I remember being crazy about avoiding them in my food. Like I'd try and buy non-GMO produce. And then I did a bit of research into it, and there's actually no, like, it's very hard to find any health, I've lost the word now, any health implications associated with genetically modified crops. They're, for the most part, they're completely healthy. I know that there's some issues with the ethics behind them and how the problem lies in the fact that when we genetically modify crops, it's for just like pumping out produce, and that falls into the whole factory farming issues. So it's more the ethics behind genetically modified crops, but um, there's actually there's no physical physical. I've lost what's the word for something that's bad? Physical issues.
Physical ailment issues, yeah.
Physical issue. There's no physical issues that come alongside with genetically modified crops, which is, there's so many people avoiding them. There's actually nothing wrong with it. The tomatoes we all eat, called flavor savers, they're genetically modified. Everything, everything that we eat is essentially genetically modified to a certain extent.
Right, okay.
And in
I go on.
in my opinion, like I think it's super important because you could change the architecture of the leaf of a certain flower or a certain crop to grow higher and grow taller. Okay, that's genetically modified organisms. That's a GMO, right? So first of all, I don't think that's something to be scared of. And then this plant, this crop would be able to take in more light absorption, therefore grow more. We all know the photosynthesis process. And with that technology, we should look into the fact that the world's population is expected to reach 9.1 billion by 2050, and the UN have said that food production will need to be increased by 70% from now until then. So my personal opinion is that GMOs are definitely a step we need to take for crops, definitely, to meet this increase in people and production that we need in food.
Right, yeah. So there's a article here called "How Will GMOs Hurt My Body? The Public's Concerns and How Scientists Have Addressed Them,"
Yep.
on Harvard University's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences website. I'll post a link to it in the video description or the podcast
Nice.
description. But
Yeah.
I've just jumped to the end. So some conclusions from a collection of 100 surveys of studies into the potential negative effects of GMO crops. So I'm just going to read out this last paragraph here because it's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
There are also concerns surrounding the ability of the modified DNA to transfer to the DNA of whomever eats it or have other toxic side effects. Depending on the degree of processing of their foods, a given person will ingest between 0.1 and 1 gram of DNA each day. As such, DNA itself is regarded as safe by the FDA. To determine if the DNA from GMO crops is as safe to consume as the DNA from traditional food sources, the International Life Sciences Institute reviewed the chemical characteristics, susceptibility to degradation, metabolic rate, and allergenicity of GMO DNA and found that in all cases, GMO DNA was completely indistinguishable from traditional DNA and thus is no more
Okay.
likely to transfer to or be toxic to a human. And
So
after more than 20 years of monitoring by countries and researchers around the world, many of the suspicions surrounding the effects of GMOs on organ health, our offspring, and our DNA have been addressed and tested. In the data discussed above, alongside many more studies not mentioned here, GMOs have been found to exhibit no toxicity in one generation or across many. Though each new product will require careful analysis and assessment of safety, it appears that GMOs as a class are no more likely to be harmful than traditionally bred and grown food sources.
bang. So
But
Curtis,
they're sponsored by
you've just
Monsanto anyway.
debunked you've just debunked any listeners who had a fear of GMOs. You went hard.
We'll see. Yeah, well,
You didn't give
I
them a
don't know. I
warning
mean,
there, man. You didn't give them a warning.
boom, boom, went in, brother. But like,
The
it's
32% of
like,
people that feel unsafe eating them, they
um,
shock.
it's weird because I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding, Monsanto and the influence of those companies on the scientific world anyway. So people might think that that was a, sponsored article or something, but it's 100 different surveys. I don't know. I've never been
Yeah.
too worried about it. The narrative we were told at uni was that no, they're fine. Like it's just bullshit. When anyone tells you they're not fine, they are totally fine. But what they might not be fine for is I know GMOs are used in order to make pesticide resistant crops and herbicide resistant crops, and then those crops are sprayed with incredibly powerful chemicals and that just aren't normal, and then the runoff goes into surrounding ecosystems and
Yep.
fucks the ecosystem. So that's one definite concern of
There's
GMOs, the
another
impact
issue
on.
for sure. Yeah. We also had someone get in touch and say that um, messing with the balance of the ecosystem may be above us, and to think of the consequences of these actions is imaginable and would only come to fruition in many years' time. So it's hard to say whether it's a good or a bad thing at this very moment, which I think is a fantastic, well thought out point to make, because it's exactly right. We don't know what we're dealing with here.
Like it might be healthy for us to eat a GMO crop, but it might not be healthy for the surrounding environment, and that could have consequences that are not so much in the public eye.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, we just received a reply to one of the stories, and
Going off.
it's actually one of the next ones that we'll be talking about. So I'll just pull that up now. Um, oh, okay. So they replied to the previous one, which was about engineering humans to be productive and
Yeah.
happy. And this person thinks that that's sounding very Nazi Germany like. Interesting point to make. I don't know if the Nazis were focused on happiness, but productivity is definitely something they were looking at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, moving on from our genetically modified organisms and crops, which I'd love to visit that again in a nutrition episode or something. I think
Mm.
there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah. There's
Um,
a lot to be said.
there's a lot to be said, mate. Let's talk about that. Would you consider genetically modified foods to be safe and healthy? That's the one we just
Yeah.
did. My bad. This is all new to me. It's a huge step in the culture cafe. But anyway, next one.
Yeah.
If you knew that your child was going to be born with a defect, would you accept genetic modification to remove the defect? This one was interesting.
Um.
Do you want to take a stab in the dark?
Um. Oh, it's interesting. Oh, okay, well, bears have some stab than no stab, and I'm gonna say it's 70% yes.
Mate, 79% yes.
Wow.
Give the man a cookie. Shit. And 21% no, obviously. That's really interesting. So a lot of people, maybe the fact that this is a somewhat anonymous poll, because I know that if you ask someone in real life, they'd probably be a little bit like a bit scared to say, yeah, I want the defect genetically engineered out. Like I think in normal society, talking about that could get a little bit antsy. Whereas in this poll, people have been happy to say, yes, I would accept the genetic modification.
Hmm.
Um, so
So
that's interesting. Where do you
yeah,
stand on that?
I don't know. I firstly I'd like to note it's interesting that 78% of people don't want to engineer the population to be as productive and as happy as possible, but 79% do want to engineer their own children to make them more likely to be productive and happy by not having a disability. I feel like there's some ethical inconsistencies, and when it comes to your own child, people tend to throw the book away. People will do anything to make sure their kids have a good life.
Yeah. Wow,
That's the first thing
that's a
that
great
stands out
point.
to me.
That's a great point. Well
Mm.
put. If you took part in that poll, maybe take a second to think about how you voted in those ones, in which where your ethical standpoint is now that that's been pointed out. Because I know that I didn't even consider that when I was thinking about the questions. Um, that's a really good one. Makes you question where you stand on the whole issue. Where do you stand on the issue?
Yeah. Um, know that your child will be born with a defect. I would be happy to have genetic modification of uh, that cell. Although it's an interesting it's an interesting hypothetical situation because I'm pretty sure they do. Oh no, no, no! I'm about to make a mistake. So yeah, I would do it for sure. I feel like as depending on, well, I mean, the alternative is that there's like three options. There's you can have the child genetically modify the yeah, I don't think it's something that we can do yet technologically. I don't think it's something that they
Yeah,
can do when they're in like a fetal stage.
we can't have
But I
designer babies yet.
no, I don't think so. But what they do
Okay.
have is I'll get to that quickly. But so there's three options. There's you have the child genetically modified and it gets through the disease. You have it genetically modified and it doesn't get rid of the disease. You don't do anything and it's guaranteed to have a disability, or you have an abortion. So Out of those three options, I don't know. It's weird. It sounds really crazy, but I tend towards almost abortion over genetic modification in a weird way. It's
Really?
so strange, but I don't know. It's like I'm feeling when I was watching Unnatural Selection, I'm like, yeah, genetic modification's good as, but now I'm sort of like, I don't know. When it comes to that, I really don't see children in utero as I don't see fetuses in utero as human, like at all. I really don't.
Yeah.
That's not something I believe in. So I don't know whether it would be better to have an abortion and then try and conceive another child, or to have it genetically I reckon actually probably genetic modification would be something that you'd do in that situation. Like being realistic, like if I was there, I'd be like, oh no, yeah, no, just do it for sure. That's what I would do
Yeah.
in this situation. Have the genetic modification, I reckon.
Yeah.
What about you?
I sit in the same camp as you for this one. If I found out that my child was going to have an ailment or um what was the word we used there? I'm trying to be careful here. A defect. I'd opt for genetic modification for sure. Yeah, but it's like you said, it's that point where we're bringing in the whole pro-life and pro-choice argument. And I wonder if when genetic modification gets to the stage that abortion is at, where it's easily accessible for a lot of communities, will we have these debates over whose right it is to make
Yeah,
these
well,
decisions?
exactly. And also what's to say that someone living with a disability is going to have a worse life? Like that's not always a decision that we can make, I don't think.
Yeah,
And it depends on the nature of the disability. If it's something minor, then maybe it's not as necessary to have genetic modification. But I know that what they have now is embryo screening. So they'll screen the embryo before they put it into the fertilized embryo before they put it into the woman's wherever it goes. It goes in the vagina, but I don't actually know where it sits, which is crazy.
yeah,
Uterus.
okay,
And so because they can screen the embryo and they can screen multiple. Like this is how it sort of gets onto designer babies because they can screen multiple and say this one will have blue eyes, this one will have this, and they know what traits the embryo expresses in its genome, and then they can
yeah,
choose which embryo they want. But they can't like pick and choose what comes up. They have to roll the dice and see what comes up in the embryo.
right,
So I think
okay,
that will be more like that will be. I feel like embryo screening will become mainstream, become very
yeah,
popular, especially for disabilities.
yeah,
But finding out there is a defect in while it's growing, like in vitro, whatever they call it,
yeah.
uh, and being able to remove it, I don't think that's going to come for many years.
Yeah, and then I guess what would come before. So, say we do get to a stage where we can analyze the embryo and figure out if it has a defect or not. What will probably come before us being able to correct that is eliminating. I think that eliminating would be a lot easier than correcting as far as science goes. So, we're first going to have to tackle the issue of once we notice that there's a defect, can we abort? And that's going to revolve around the same issues we have today, where who has the right to make that decision.
Mm.
Again, that's another episode in itself, and we both have our views, and our listeners all have our views on that. It's another morally sensitive issue for a lot of people.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, like I don't know, I was so quick to be like, oh, I'd probably like abort the child and try again in a hypothetical situation that you could have
yeah,
unlimited children and it'll be fine and you could just keep going and trying again. Because I know it's actually not that easy usually for a lot of people.
yeah,
You have to try a lot of times sometimes to get a successful fertilized egg. So maybe, yeah, I think people would tend. I'm not surprised at the results. 79% of people are a
yeah.
yes.
No, 100%. I think for now I definitely sit in the camp which is yes, if I knew there was going to be a defect and we had the technology to correct that, I'd be happy to take genetic engineering as an option.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
Um,
completely retract my previous answer. Anyway, next question.
yeah, sure. Do governments have the right to make laws surrounding genetic engineering, or should people have free access to the science? So this goes back to regulating now versus letting businesses innovate. Do you want me to go ahead and read the stats on this one?
Please do.
So 63% of people voted in favor of the government making laws, and 37% of people voted in favor of the people having the control. So that's an interesting one. How do you sit on this topic?
I stand with, I feel like regulation is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, and also when you give it to the people at the end of the day, I don't know, it's sort of, pretty anarchical. And also having no regulation on technology is, like, for example, there was no vote on whether the internet should exist, or whether
Yeah.
companies like Facebook should be susceptible to hacking and influenced by media and psychological marketing campaigns like we
Yeah.
saw in the UK and US elections. All these things that the government is like, oh, it's technology. It's not like our place to intervene, and it's
Yeah.
had very negative consequences.
100%. I think that's such a great example, and I was thinking of it as well. I'm so glad you brought that up, because
Yeah.
it's such a similar scenario where we have this technology that no one fully understands yet and where it could go. And if the government doesn't step in and put in some sort of regulatory framework, then it could just take off into God knows where, or God knows what sort of
Yeah.
Pandora's box we're opening here.
Yeah.
We had a really good response from a listener, one of our new listeners actually, and they know, well, anyone who's having their response read out knows who they are. But they've said to this question, governments should have some regulations. However, all information should be distributed to citizens so they can know what is happening and be informed. They go on to say that to a certain extent, transparency in almost all topics is vital to having a proper democracy. And this topic specifically,
100%.
it is important to be transparent since it relates to the health and well-being of humans! Exclamation mark.
100% transparency is so important. It's something that I feel like has sort of come away from the forefront of our governments of our time. I feel like I
Yeah.
can't trust a hoe nowadays.
Can't trust a shorten.
Not at all. No,
All
I
right.
can trust Shorten. Fucking shout out my boy Shorten.
Oh, really? Okay.
Can't trust
Let's go.
can't trust a ScoMo. Can't trust a fucking ScoMo.
I wonder what those boys have been doing when it comes to genetic engineering. Okay, so where do you sit
Probably
on
genetically engineering the coal fossils somehow to make them more environmentally unfriendly.
So my opinion on the government versus people having free access, I think it's like you said, it's quite dangerous and loose to give the people the complete power in this situation. Just purely going off what we saw on Facebook, I can understand where the people who voted for people, I can see where they're coming from. Yes, like there's a massive lack of trust with the government, and society has for countless decades been screwed over by those who are in power when it comes to these sort of things. So yes, the people should have a say, but I don't think the people should be in control. I think that proper democratic processes should be put in place to provide regulatory framework for this, and policymakers. I think that there should be parties of people made, a congress of people made from all those who are stakeholders in this issue. So, those who are sick and affected by genetic diseases, the scientists who study it, the politicians, potentially philosophers. There should be a complete collection of people who get together and talk about this on behalf of who they're representing. So that could be done through summits and hearings and meetings. All the countries should be given a voice from developed nations to non-developed nations. And all different religions should have their voices heard in this topic as well, I think.
Oh, we all know what's gonna happen there. But all those regular, as you say, those like regulatory panels need to also have legitimate like legal authority. They can't just be
Yeah,
I don't think they can provide recommendations to the government, because we all know that they're not going to follow their recommendations anyway. Well,
yeah.
it's a lot less persuasive. It needs to be like I believe that they would need to have enforceable like advice that like is going to be acted on,
So we could potentially, I say we could potentially
or
do this.
must
Like
be voted on, something like that. Yeah.
yeah, we could, moving forward, maybe if there was a court, you know, the court
Mm.
of genetic engineering put into place, and this group of people who are representing everyone um, took a vote, or if, I don't know how, if you could have everyone in the world vote on something like this, it's ideally that would be, oh, would it be ideal actually? Because everyone comes from a different standpoint with different values and uh, different understandings of what success is and what development means. So it's definitely a tough one. But yeah, I think we both sit in the idea that the governments should, or there should, maybe not governments per se, but there should be a regulatory body to take care of this, not just left to the people. Because once it's left to the people with the money are going to be the ones controlling how it advances and how it develops. I think that would be my biggest fear, and that's
Mm.
currently how it is right now. There is no
Mm.
framework for it.
Mm.
Um, moving on to the next one. Do humans have the right to genetically modify other animals for our own survival as a species?
Mm.
So,
Right to engineer animals.
yeah, we have 59% of people saying no and 41% of people saying yes.
Mm.
How do you feel about this one?
I find it interesting that people think that we don't have the right to. I think it's interesting that people think that we don't have the right to engineer animals to express different genes, but we have the right to kill animals and have them live their lives in factory farms and be abused and used for sport and entertainment. Uh, where where that's acceptable by the majority of society, but to have them used with different chemicals to make their body composition different, that's unacceptable to the majority. I find that
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, there's that criticism on people's uh, ethical decisions getting mixed up, that hypocrisy coming from people.
Mm. It's
Um,
hypocrisy, because if there was truly those who are for animal well, I think it's an interesting. People have very different, very specific ideas of how animals' welfare should be upheld in society,
yeah,
and if they're saying that it goes against nature and stuff like that, well, I'm pretty sure like factory farming goes against nature as well.
it's yeah, we've definitely passed that point of going past nature. Um, I think, yeah, I think this is an interesting one as well, because what do we, um, which animals are we giving the the right to not be genetically engineered to, and which animals are we saying, yeah, sure, we can engineer that? I'm sure that if someone said to you, uh, okay, we're going to start engineering, you know, cows to be juicier and fattier and your steaks are going to taste better. And then they came to you and said the same thing, like, we're going to start engineering dogs with CRISPR to make them happier or something. They'd probably be a little bit like, oh, but I don't know how I feel about you injecting my dog with this new serum. When in reality, we're already doing that to so many animals. And
Mm.
you have, going even further, you have the example of the mosquitoes in Africa. I, you know, I'd be more than happy to see those eradicated to stop the spread of malaria. I think that's something to be looked into for sure. And I'd also agree with the rats being taken out of the ecosystem in New Zealand, um, provided that there's no other far-reaching consequences, which is, a perfect world. But at the same time, I'm not okay with cows and pigs being pumped full of hormones and chickens being made too big for their own legs to carry. So I'm sort of making that parallel where I'm not making parallel. I'm making that decision where cows and pigs and chickens are worth more than mosquitoes, which I think is correct. But there'd be people out there who are like, no, all life is sacred. You can't do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think all these questions, they're complicated questions, and like you can only a yes or no answer doesn't like is like obviously it's a poll. It's still good as to get people's opinions, but like they're all my answers to all these are like sort of like yes but sort of
Yeah,
for
yeah,
most of them. It's
it
like
really is like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
it's not black and white for these sorts of questions. I don't think you can
a
get
lot
black
of
and white
people,
answers.
a lot of people did get back to us and say, it's hard. It's they basically said yes but no or no but yes, and I can't really answer this. I don't have enough information. Um, I know. What other responses? We had some good responses on this one, and uh, it was what was it? It was on the government one, and they said based off the best practices advised by contracted top scientists, but where do the values lie with the top scientists? So
Yeah.
it's a tough one. It really is a tough one. So we have one more, and that is I keep skipping past it. What fears do you have regarding genetic engineering? So people actually were able to respond to this one and not just give out a yes or a no answer. And we had, where's the first response? The first response was overpopulation, which is a fear, which we spoke about. And that's definitely a real fear. If we engineer humans to survive for longer than we're meant to, then that's an issue. We then had the response for it to cross lines. So they're afraid of it crossing lines. They say that we tend to be ambitious in the sense that we forget safety and prioritize success. I think that's a brilliant response, and it highlights one of humans' biggest issues, which is greed.
Yeah,
Well played.
definitely.
The next one was, and this was actually a really popular one. I was surprised. This person's afraid of social division amongst the rich and soon to be perfect through genetic engineering who can afford it, and the poor and normal who won't be able to afford it. Someone else replied and said, I don't know enough about it, with an exclamation mark and one of these emojis. Fair play. The next response was making mistakes and somebody or some species living with the consequences. Great one. And I won't read all of them, but the next one was people will be drunk like me right now and create weird shit, and we won't be able to stop it.
Yeah.
And that was a friend from Melbourne. That's a goodie. So yeah, there's some really interesting responses.
And what do you
Just
think, Owen? What are some of your concerns?
some of my concerns. I think my concern is the biggest one is the idea that the rich will run away with this technology and leave a lot of poor people behind. That's one thing, and a lot of people share that one. I think it's a massive issue, and not to mention my other biggest fear is that we don't know enough about this to make some of the decisions that we're currently making. And I know I've said throughout this episode how exciting it all is and how great it could be, but it scares me that we don't fully understand the potential of this. How about
Definitely.
yourself?
I think one of my major ones is just exploitation of whoever's going to be on the receiving end of this. So whether it be humans, animals, or the ecosystem, I feel like there's a lot of potential for people's lives potentially could be affected. Human, animal lives definitely could be impacted for better or for worse. But like I feel like there's potential for exploitation.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that's a good one. Definitely. Um, we also had, I want to read this one out. This was someone's input, and they said humans have reached the capacity to intervene in the most essential part of nature, which is reproduction. But that was, but their question is, hang on, I'm struggling to read this one out. Their question is, will intervening with nature and intervening with reproduction improve the state of living together amongst humans? We can make smarter, bigger, stronger, prettier, and more intelligent humans, but will they be more humane?
Yeah, that's
good. That's
I don't know.
insightful.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a tricky question to answer. What do you think, Owen?
I think I know the person who said this, and I know I've spoken to them at length about how one of the biggest issues in society is that we don't have peace amongst us as people. We're not talking about peace among nations. We're talking about peace between individual human beings being at peace with each other and being humane to each other. And I've spoken at length to this person about how important that is. So I agree completely that everyone's looking at genetic engineering and going, oh, we can solve all these physical attributes. But one of the biggest things that we need to solve as humans in today's society is it's more of a spiritual issue of
Oh,
peace with each other.
so true. I literally hadn't thought it. Literally, I hadn't thought about the whole time until just then, to the whole issue. But I think there's something just, it's sort of just symptomatic of like our desire for like the next best thing and wanting to like become some better
Yes.
version of ourselves
Yes.
when contrasted with others who don't actually have those attributes. Is literally just like competition. And it seems
Yeah.
actually really, it touches on something that some really negative aspects of our collective identity in Western
Yeah.
society.
And this is the only person who's actually brought that idea forward, which, that's not to say that everyone's bad and they're looking at this the wrong way, but the fact that such a small percentage of people who responded to this question have brought up the spiritual side of things is like, it really isn't something that humans are wired to look out for. And it goes back to
No,
what
not at
someone else
all.
said, where they're scared of this becoming something that people use for greed rather than the benefit of the human race and being humane, as this person said.
Yeah. Like, where does this desire come from? This like strong desire to try and like, yeah, mess with this. I don't know.
Yeah, like I'm trying the ambitious in the sense that we forget safety and prioritize success. That's what
Mm,
someone else said. So
yeah.
yeah, we've got. It's like it's so true, right? Like I know we like you and I have spoken about it before. How it's like it's so important to have this development amongst people where like just being good, just be a good person. Like that's something we need to conquer before we can look at conquering whether we have blue or green eyes or whether our left arm is stronger than our right and those sort of physical ailments, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. Changing the moral consciousness of everyone in the world might be the most important thing of our time. I feel like it
Yeah,
underroots all these problems. Everything has a moral basis, and perhaps, like, because I was thinking about it, like politicians and international relations experts and diplomacy has gotten us this far, but at the end of the day, when everyone is motivated for self-interest and the wrong reasons, I feel like we can never actually achieve peace until people change like their thinking around the world.
yeah. It's so true. It's so true.
And it's so impossible. It's so impossible.
And something. This is a bit of a segue here. I'm getting so fucking good at this, but no,
Getting so fucking good.
fuck, man. No. So the person who brought up this idea in the response of, humans being smarter, bigger, stronger, prettier, but not more humane, is someone we're looking at getting onto the show. So stay tuned because this whole talk about what Curtis just said, he put it so perfectly that I don't even want to try and repeat it. But these whole ideas of spirituality and like peace between people and caring about other people rather than just diplomacy and international relations is going to be a topic we're really going to dive into soon with a
Oh,
special
I'm
guest.
excited. Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
it's going to be a really good one. So, genetic engineering has been fun, but there's more. There's more to talk about.
Oh, it goes deeper. It goes deeper, baby.
Goes deep. So,
Um,
let's do a summary of this episode of genetic engineering and our thoughts on it.
sure, sure thing.
So, yeah, I guess we've looked. Whoa, there's a lot to. We've looked
Yeah,
at
I
the
don't think I can touch
CRISPR-Cas9
that.
tool.
Just yeah.
We've looked into the ethics, the agricultural benefits, the benefits when it comes to diseases and physical ailments, which are definitely not to be overlooked. They're super important. We've looked at the issues of big pharma making these technologies and medicines unavailable to the general public, particularly in America. We also had a chat about the Instagram poll and how successful that was and how good it
That was
was to
great.
get everyone's feedback. That was really fun. The ethical issues of regulating it now or waiting for it to develop before we regulate it.
And then I guess we touched on there might be something a bit wrong here with this huge desire for genetic modification. Maybe that's not. It's indicative of something just a bit off with our thinking at the moment as a species.
Yeah, why aren't we looking? Why is that a measure of our success? Why is
Mm,
being better a measure of success? Why aren't we looking towards more spiritual definitions for success and development?
mhm.
Yeah, that sums up today's episode. That was a wild one. If you're still
Oh,
with us,
that's my
if
favorite.
you
That's
are
my
still
favorite.
with us,
One
thank you
hour,
for
40
staying.
minutes in.
Holy shit, this is some Joe Rogan shit. Um, yeah, wow, thanks for listening. Oh, I had so much. I'm having so much fun recording this one. Hope you're having
Yeah,
fun listening. Um,
likewise.
yeah,
Segments or putting segments
yeah,
together?
yeah. Let's get into the segments.
Okay,
Let's get out of this heavy topic.
okay. Segment music of the week time. What you been listening to, Owen?
All right. I've actually been listening to Skin on Skin and Mole Grab's new EP.
Oh, really?
Oh
How
my
it is?
God. It's it's good. It's it's good. There's only there's
It's like
technically
it's
two
not as
songs and one
heavy.
of
It's
them
not
is
like
a
super heavy.
remix.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's not super heavy. It's
Yeah.
for those of you who are listening now, Skin on Skin is it's sort of like uh deep house meets help me out here.
Meets south oh no, like Memphis rap, got the gangster rap element, bit of that East Coast, so many chops and breaks, and then yeah, and a good
Yeah.
intersect of techno house and
Yeah.
rap music.
And it's deep. It's got some it's good. You can dance to it. You can really dance to it. Um so that's what I've been listening to. Absolutely loving it. Shout out to the time that we saw Skin on Skin at an awesome music festival in Australia, Witwa. Big
Shout
ups.
out most days.
The man. The
Um,
man.
the man. I've been listening to something different. I'm going to take you to the podcast realm. What podcast I've been listening to? Because I haven't been listening to much music. Um, My Dad Wrote a Porno. Absolutely hilarious. Have you heard of that one?
I've heard about it. I've never actually listened to it.
Classic. Like the main host's dad is literally like an erotic fiction writer, and he gets two of his friends, and they read through it, and it's like their reactions. It's so funny,
Fuck.
so funny.
Okay. That's that sounds good.
Yeah, yeah,
That
it's
sounds
funny
like a
as
bit of
man.
fun.
Yeah,
Nice. I'll have to check that out. Our
peeve.
listeners will have to check that out.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay.
It's
Do
funny
you have a
as.
peeve of the week?
Peeve of the week. Um, could you take us away potentially? Do you have
Yeah,
one?
I can take us away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, man, I'm angry.
Okay. Oh,
I'm
it's not a
peeved.
peeve, it's anger.
I got a little itch and I can't scratch it. I got a bone to pick. You listening?
Listen.
All right. I got a bone to pick with people who don't stop to think about other people and other issues. All right? Okay? They're one-sided. They're thinking of themselves. I'm gonna sling something at Joe Rogan. You done
At
peeved me,
Joe
son.
Rogan. I thought Joe Rogan was always that multi-perspective dude.
So did I, but I heard something. And he probably doesn't even notice it, but I heard something today. So Joe Rogan will say a lot of things and he'll say, you know what? Don't let it upset you. It's just a word. Like he'll drop some pretty offensive words and he'll say, oh, it's part of a comedy act, or you know, don't be such a snowflake. He's very much that sort of guy, which at times I've respected, and at times I've been like a bit, oh, you can't say that. Today, I was listening to his interview with Paul Stamets, his second one with Paul Stamets, and Paul Stamets called him um, an advocate of the paleo diet, right? You just threw that out there, which essentially Rogan is. Rogan turns around and goes, actually, I'd prefer you didn't use that word. I don't really like it. I don't affiliate with it. So can you not use it again? And he wasn't being sarcastic. And I thought everything just came crashing down. And I just
So
thought, you
hypocritical.
fucking hypocrite. The amount of times he's dropped certain words that
So much
groups of
worse.
people would hate that are so much worse and said, oh, I'm using the word. It doesn't matter. And he's gotten upset about being called a paleo.
Has
At Joe
anyone else
Rogan, you
picked up
done
on it?
peeved me, son.
Has anyone else picked
I'm
up on
not
it?
sure. I was listening to the podcast, so I didn't do my usual YouTube comment scroll. But
Yeah. They're good. They're
man,
almost as good as the video.
yeah, Joe, don't call me a paleo Rogan. Get out of here, son.
Yeah.
There's a new podcaster in town.
Well, you scared, boy. You best out running. Um, okay, my peeve of the week. I think just people. It's hard to say because I've been working. I work at Woolies. See people every day, sort of getting their shopping in the middle of like going home from work. They're sort of like, but in general, people who rush and feel very stressed about getting things done quickly, like when if you take a step back, might not necessarily be that much of an issue. Like especially at the shops, everyone's really stressed and trying to like get shit done quickly. And more specific example. Okay, my peeve, I gotta change it. People who don't
Go
fucking
get him.
understand
Go
how
get him.
people who don't fucking understand how to use the self-serve machines, fuck cunt, you've used it like 20 times. You've used it like at least 20 times, maybe 200 times. Probably use it once a week at least. And no one knows how to use the machines. And I have to spend so much time helping them. It's literally my job. Hopefully my manager doesn't listen to this. um, and like and then when it fucks up, the guy like grabs this guy comes in, he's like rushing, like jumpy ass, like, oh, scan, thought, like, gotta get it all done really quickly. And then he stuffs up, makes a mistake, picks up all his shit. He's like, oh, he realizes it's a card only machine, picks it up, walks over to a non-card one, starts using it, and then he makes a mistake because he hasn't scanned something because he's rushing so much. So he puts it down on the weighing bit, and it's like, oh, unexpected item in the bagging area. And he's like, oh, fuck, like raging. And I come over to help
Scan
him,
the
and I'm like,
apples as potatoes. Ah.
exactly. And like I'm pressing the buttons and he's some like pommy guy or something. And I'm pressing the buttons trying to fix it. It's like, oh, can you just fucking get on with it? And I was like, excuse me, like, and I was literally like, excuse me, I'm trying to help you. And he's just like, sounds like mumbling. I think he realizes like that was so inappropriate. Like, why the fuck did you say that? It's like, get on with it. And I'm like, bro, just chill, man. It's fucking fine. It's going to cost you like an extra 10 seconds while I help you get your shit done because you're rushing so much you can't do it properly. Anyway,
Man, I'm
I
peeved.
feel good. That felt good.
Yeah. How good does it feel? Get that rant out, son.
Do I need to censor myself?
No, fuck no.
Yeah.
I was expecting your peeve to be on the American healthcare system, but we can save that
That's
for another
probably
time. That's
that's
an
a more
episode
legitimate
peeve.
pick. Mm.
God damn. Okay. Well, we got
Yeah.
out of our systems. How about a bit of wholesomeness for the week? You got anything to
Sure.
share that was super wholesome this week, or something nice?
Um. Oh, wholesomeness. I always forget about the wholesomeness. Wholesomeness of the week. What did I do that was really good? Went to Savers with a friend yesterday morning. We had fun. We had coffee. We had pizza, and it was a good morning. I'm grateful for it.
I that that's beautiful. That was good right there.
And
Um,
you?
and me, oh, um, I'm grateful for being given uh for one of my classmates. He's from Morocco, which is where I really want to travel soon. And this bloke's basically, he's been happy to just sit down with me and talk about where to go in Morocco. And he's just a wealth of knowledge. Just, yeah, yeah, and you should go here and it's good at this times and you'll like this. And, talking about the local foods and showing me a few videos on the food. Awesome. So,
Have
and
you made your tangine?
no, but pretty keen to try it. Pretty damn
Yeah.
keen to try and make it. But yeah, just people just being happy to sit down and offer advice on things is what I'm grateful for with that particular example. But my wholesomeness is yeah, just people who are happy to give a bit of advice. You should go here. You should check this out.
Nice.
Respect.
Love that.
That's,
That is so
yeah,
good.
wholesome shit.
Yeah.
Damn,
Culture Cafe
that's
episode 12. Is that
episode
it?
12 or 11. Are we up to 12 already?
I think we're up to 12. I think we're up to 12.
We are, yeah. Wow. We are, yeah.
And
Nice
that was my
haircut, by the
favorite
way.
episode. Thank you, man.
That's all right. Can you give me
That
a
was my
side
favorite
profile?
episode.
Yes. Fresh.
Thank you. Thank you. You're looking
Yeah,
like you
that
need a
was.
trim, brother.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Be awkward if I just got one, wouldn't it?
Oh, did you?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, that would be
I haven't
so
had
good.
one since I got here. I am due.
Yeah.
I am. It's
Yeah.
getting a bit fluffy.
Should
Oh,
get one of
yes.
your roommates to
Maybe.
give you the
That'd be a
touch
bit of
up.
fun. That'd be fun,
Yeah.
wouldn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, that was a fun episode. Thanks everyone who's still listening. Again, if you're still listening,
Fucking knows.
fucking props.
Yeah.
It is time to wrap this one up for sure. Stay tuned for our next one. Big ups for everyone who interacted with the Instagram polls. That's going to be something we
I
really
was sick.
get into. That was so much fun.
Yeah.
So thanks to everyone, and thanks for everyone who continues to subscribe. Welcome to the new listeners. Super happy to have you on board. And yeah, I guess we can. Man, we suck at this.
Yeah. Culture Cafe episode 12 over and out. This is Curtis signing off. Stay tuned for more Culture Cafe productions.
This is Owen. I'll see you all later.